So, you did a roller coaster in Lakewood this year? Lakeside? Isn't that oh, it's in Hayward? I think so. I think the property is they own it. I presume. That's my guess. Properties.
I don't know how many of you have heard this story. I don't remember if I've told the story of how I met my wife. It was 2019, and I drove up to Lubbock, Texas to join the Adventures in Missions program. And I don't remember at what point I first met Alyssa, but as we began to find our permanent seating assignments in class, I sat on the front row all the way to the left-hand side, and my wife, Alyssa, sat all the way to the front on the left-hand side of the center. So she was on the same area, and we were both kind of Bible geeks, so I had my row of Bible pens, had a color code system so I could find things, and she would bring a forklift down to the basement with this interlinear Greek and Hebrew Bible that was as big as she was, and she just loved, getting into things like that. I struggled through Greek in class. She had to drop that course while we were in school, and she tutored me through Greek, if that tells you anything about how smart she is. We didn't really become romantically involved in any way until we went back to Sunset. So we had our field time, and we were good friends throughout that time, and we reconnected once we were back in Lubbock for school. We spent a lot of time together, and as I got to know her, I couldn't help but fall in love with who she was. She had a heart to serve. She had a heart for the ministry. She loved the Lord with everything that she was. She knew the Word of God maybe even better than I did at times, and she challenged me in that way. But one of the things that was hard to not notice was the fact that her body often betrayed her. She wasn't able to do all the things that she wanted to do. She wasn't able to attend class all the time because often she was sick. And, I often thought I knew how to help her. And she was maybe even too patient with me as I tried to tell her what she should do to fix her health conditions. But eventually we fell in love, and she put up with me, and we got married, and I'm grateful for that. As we came to the end of our time at Sunset, every student preaches what they call their senior sermon. And it's an overwhelming task, right? You stand before the faculty of the school, giants in the faith, and you try to figure out what are you going to say, what are you going to preach that could in any way impact such men who have been around the faith and taught so many for so long. And as I thought about that, I decided that I would preach on the topic that we're going to be looking at, the passage we're going to be looking at this morning. The text itself was not challenging. I was well equipped from my time at Sunset to handle the text. But the application, that was harder. Really getting the application right was difficult. And I didn't want to rely just upon my own experience. I wanted to make sure that I got somebody else's experience. So there was a member of the Sunset Church who had recently been dealing with a variety of health issues. So I went, and he was kind enough to allow me to come by his place of work and to visit with him for a little bit about their experiences. They have gone through his wife losing her health, the struggle of figuring out what's going on, trying to find an answer, trying to restore her to full health. And I don't remember a lot about that conversation, but there's one thing that stuck with me. He said that and this is an exact quote, but he said, the church is really good about coming around people during emergencies. They bring food, they take care of the kids, they send cards, they send letters, they offer to clean your house. The church has been great. He said, but when things continue on for an extended period of time like it has in our situation, people wear out. It's hard to stay, and I think this is the quote that really stuck with me. People can't stay in emergency mode forever with you. And that stuck with me. As him and his family, over a course of, I think, 2 or 3 years at that point, had dealt with this health issue, it was hard for the church to stay with them in that emergency mode. They fatigued. And I think we see that in our own lives, don't we? If nothing else, we've seen that throughout the pandemic as we have fatigued over health issues. Right? We want to get back to normal, and it's understandable to want to get back to normal. We're used to sicknesses lasting a few days or maybe a week. For it to go on for an extended period of time is challenging. And we see this in other conflicts, right? We see this in Ukraine as it has drifted from the headlines, and we could go through the history books and go over a number of things that have lasted years. And eventually we fatigue. We can't stay in emergency mode forever. I bring these things up because it shows the relevancy of the study we're doing right now. We're in the middle of a study of the Gospel of Mark. We're looking at Jesus. And we're going to pick up kind of where we left off the last 2 weeks. Jesus and his disciples are moving across the Sea of Galilee. And a storm comes up, and they come to Jesus and they ask, "Do you care?" Jesus gets up and rebukes the storm, calms the sea, and then they ask a different question. Who is this who can calm the sea with a word? When they get to the other side and he then casts out the demons of Legion, once again, I think they're left asking, who is this? And Mark really illustrates the conundrum that we have as we seek to answer, who is this? And does he care? As those of the Gennesaret area, those around that area, asked Jesus to leave. And the question is, will we be like that man who was healed of his demon, who longed to go with Jesus, and yet was obedient to stay and tell his story? Or will we be those people who sent Jesus away? They all got back in the boat. If I was one of Jesus' disciples, I'd have said, "Thanks, but no thanks, I'll walk. I don't want to get back across that lake." But they got back in the boat and they crossed over to the other side. And we pick up here in Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed to the other side in the boat, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogues, Jairus by name. Seeing him, he fell at his feet. He implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands upon her, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him, a throng about him. So Jesus gets to the other side of the lake, and he's met by a huge crowd. As word spreads through town that Jesus is back, Jairus hears, and he's in crisis mode. His little girl of 12 years old is sick. She's at the point of death. Things are getting very worrisome. And a father seeking to do whatever he can to heal his little girl, to save his little girl, leaves her bedside, what may be her very last moments, in hopes that maybe, just maybe, he might be able to save her. And he runs to Jesus, and he finds him, and he falls at his feet, and he implores him, "Jesus, please come heal my girl. Please keep her safe." And Jesus, in kindness, in compassion, comes along with him. I want you to put yourself in Jairus' shoes as he's worried about his little girl, as he's made his way to Jesus, as Jesus is with him in tow and he's making his way, but he is impeded by the crowd. Like one of those ambulances that are stuck in traffic. Right? Just get out of the way. We got somewhere we got to go. There's important things to do. And Jesus is impaired by this crowd as they're making their way through, and Jairus is urgent to get Jesus to his daughter's bedside, to get back to his girl. We can feel that urgency, can't we? We can feel the emergency in that situation. And the story continues, starting in verse 25. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for about 12 years, who had suffered much under many physicians, spent all she had, and was no better but grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch his garment, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up. She felt her body that she had been healed of her disease. Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched me?" The disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. We're in the midst of this emergency situation. Jairus is trying to make a hole in the crowd. Jesus is following. And all of a sudden, the story changes. We hear about this woman who has been suffering for 12 years with this illness, who also has heard about Jesus and makes her way through the crowd and touches the hem of Jesus' garment. And all of a sudden, everything comes to a standstill. Everything comes to a stop. I want you to begin by putting yourself in her shoes. Put yourself in her shoes for a moment. She is not just dealing with a health issue for 12 years. Due to the culture in which she lives and the nature of her illness, she is ceremonially unclean all the time. This means she is unable to attend the temple. She is unable to go to synagogue. She is unable to be a part of most of society. She is unclean. There's also a stigma in this day that is attached to those who deal with illness, especially long-term illness. What have you done? What sin have you committed? We see this when the disciples see the man born blind. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that this horrible thing would happen? I'm sure there were people who muttered, what has she done that has deserving of this pain, of this hardship? Maybe she's asked that of herself. What have I done, Lord, that has caused this illness? Will you not take it away? She suffered for 12 years. She is drained spiritually and emotionally. She's wondered about the sins in her life. But practically, we also have to acknowledge that the nature of her illness means that she is anemic. With the constant loss of blood, she is fatigued. She is worn down physically. She doesn't have the stamina that she wants to in order to deal with life and to do the things she dreams of doing. She is tired and she is broken. And to add insult to injury, she has gone to every doctor she can manage. She has used all of her savings, wherever it has come from, everything that she could get to get help. And she hasn't even gotten better. In fact, she's gotten worse. She's gotten worse. She's had a difficult life. We don't know if at one point in her life she was healthy. That might be a safe assumption. She seems to be somebody who was older. Maybe she was married even. Maybe she was pregnant at one time. Maybe it was due to complications of that she has her current predicament. We don't know. Maybe she's even been divorced because of 12 years of being ceremonially unclean and all these struggles, and maybe he didn't stick around. There doesn't seem to be anybody in her corner who can go to Jesus on her behalf. She is alone, kept at arm's length by her community. She is unable to be a part of her faith community. She is on the outside. She is suffering. I almost guarantee you, after 12 years of such a hardship, she is depressed. She is broken. And yet, she is also a woman of great faith. She knows the Scriptures. In Malachi chapter 4, verse 2, it says, "But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings, and you shall go out leaping like a calf from the stall." Malachi here is predicting the day of the Messiah. the day when Elijah would come back, that the righteous would find healing, that they would find restoration. She longs for that day. She longs to leap like a calf once more. She has been wearied for years. And she says, you know what? If I could just touch the hem of His garment, if I could touch His tassels, then I could be healed. There's healing in His tassels. She believes that Jesus is the Messiah. She believes this is the day. She has faith. But she also does not believe she is worthy to take up any of His time, to approach Him. Maybe the crowd itself is overwhelming, but she pushes through anyway. She doesn't come to Jesus. She doesn't try to get His attention. She pushes through the crowd quietly. Eventually, it seems she may have fallen down. She reaches in through and she touches the bottom of His garment, touches the hem of His robe. There on His tassels, there on His wings, and she's healed. Completely healed. And she knows it. What a wonderful moment. She now is able to begin a process of rejoining society, of doing the things she dreamed of doing. And Jesus stops dead in His tracks, no more than a few feet from where she was. Who touched me? The disciples looking around at Jesus. What do you mean, who touched you? We're in Times Square here. Everyone's touching you. Can you imagine Jairus? He's making a way through the crowd. He's trying to get Jesus to his daughter as fast as he can. And he looks back and there's Jesus stopped. Come on, we got to go. What are you talking about? Who touched me? Everyone's touching you. I'm getting touched by everyone. Let's go. But Jesus stops. And He's looking. Who touched me? Who touched me? Why would Jesus stop? Why would Jesus interrupt helping this family in crisis? In a word, because she's worth it. Because she is worthy of His time and His attention. See, her body has been healed, but her spirit has not. She is worthy of His time and His attention. She needs His time and attention. Starting again in verse 32. And He looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before Him and told Him the whole truth. And He said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Jesus sought her out. Jesus sought her out. Luke says that when she was aware that she would not go unnoticed, when she knew she wouldn't just be able to slip into the crowd, when He wasn't going to let up, that's when she came forward. See, those who are hurting must be sought out. Those who are oppressed must be sought out with love and with compassion. She tells her story. She comes forward and tells it all. There's something therapeutic about this. So much of therapy, if you go to a counselor, is simply talking, telling your story to somebody who will listen, somebody who will acknowledge what you've gone through. We pay big money for somebody to just listen. Somebody to just listen. We need our story to be acknowledged. We need to make sense of our own story. And Jesus allows her to do that. He allows her to tell her story. He allows her to make sense of her own story. He allows her to be seen for what she has gone through, for her faith. And He accepts her for who she is. He cares for her. He calls her daughter. Don't miss this. Don't miss this. He calls her daughter. The story begins with a father imploring Jesus to go and save his daughter of 12 years. And here is a woman who doesn't seem to have anybody to advocate on her behalf. And he says, "Daughter." He shows his care, his concern for her. He meets her where she is and sends her away in peace. It's important that we do not compare pain. It was in one of my teaching labs at Sunset. I was preaching to some extent on Job, or maybe I was making a passing comment about Job and how our suffering is not to compare with his. Right? Job's suffering is way up here, and ours is, down here. And when I got through my sermon, my instructor was kind enough to tell me, don't do that. Don't compare pain. And he was so right. No one wins when we compare pain. Job is not helped by his pain being the greatest. And it only undermines our own. To tell somebody that you know somebody who suffered more doesn't help. It might be somewhat comforting to know that it could be worse, but that doesn't take away the pain of the now. We need people to exist with us in our pain, to accept us and to walk with us in our pain. No one benefits when we compare. Pain is pain. I'm allergic to it. I don't know about you, but I don't like pain. I don't like suffering. It's not fun. But what happens next does grab our heartstrings, doesn't it? In Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 35, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the son of James, or the brother of James. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue. And Jesus saw a commotion of people wailing loudly. I want you to put yourself in Jairus' shoes for a moment. You've left your daughter's bedside. You've sought help. You got help. And then you were held up by a crowd. You were held up by a woman in need. And then you received the worst news of your life. Your little girl is passed on. He's devastated. He's in pain. He may be even a little bit angry at the situation if he's not just in flat-out denial and numbness. Why did the crowd have to press in? Why couldn't they let us just go? Maybe he's even angry at this lady. Why did you have to bother the teacher in the middle of this? Couldn't you have waited until after? Wait your turn. Right? Once again, it's important not to compare pain, but Jesus in compassion comes to him and says and encourages him to continue in faith. And I think we should acknowledge and notice the difference in how Jesus ministers in this situation versus how the world does. It's at this moment that Jesus selects only 3 of his disciples and either requires the rest of them to help hold the crowd back or dismisses the rest of his disciples with the rest of the crowd. And just Jesus and Jairus and 3 of his disciples head on to the house. Starting in verse 39, "And when they had entered, he said to them, 'Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping.' And they laughed at him. But he put them outside the house and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went into where the child was." The world has a tendency, we have a natural tendency to have a big show of emotion at the onset of a tragedy. It's natural. Israel had a culture of having professional mourners, people who would make a commotion, people who would make a big show of tragedy. And Jesus comes in, and instead of making a big show, he sends them away. And he exists in that moment of pain with the family. It's just him, the mother and father, and his 3 disciples. He exists in the pain with them. And it's important that we learn to simply exist in the pain with people. That we simply are with them. We can do that. Be with them in the storm. So often we say the wrong things because we want to try to fix it, because we know it's not right. But there's nothing to say. We'll fix it. So, we have to exist with them in the storm. But Jesus can do more. Jesus has to do more. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Tabitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl rose up and began to walk, for she was about 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Do not make the mistake of telling somebody who is bereaved it's God's will. Do not make the mistake of telling somebody that God just needed them more than you did. Number one, that's a lie. Number two, it doesn't help. Do you want to know what the will of God is? The will of God is that none would perish. God created a perfect world, completely free of both death and disease. Think about what Jesus does every time he comes across a funeral procession. Every time Jesus comes to somebody who is dead, what does he do? He can't stand himself. He brings Lazarus out of the tomb. He raises the dead every time. What happens when sick people come to Jesus? He can't help himself. He has to send them away healed. God made a world where there was no death and no disease. It is not the will of God that any would suffer. It is not the will of God that any would die. It's the result of our sin. It is the result of our fallen world and our rebellion against God that those things exist. He'll work through them. He'll work in spite of them, but He is not the cause of them. Jesus came for the purpose of defeating death. In the end, death had no mastery over Him. He holds the keys of death and Hades. He's victorious. He's victorious. We see here very clearly the compassion of Jesus. As we look at the gospel message proclaimed in Mark, we do wonder, is the good news for me? Does it impact me and my life where I'm at? The first question we have to ask is, does He have the power? Can Jesus help? Well, we've seen Him calm the storm. No one can do that. The weatherman can only make the best predictions of the weather today, and he's wrong most of the time. We've seen Him heal a man, free a man of his demons, and now we've seen Him raise the dead and heal the sick. But more than that, we see that Jesus cares enough to actually apply that power to help. That He has the compassion to be there with people in their pain. That He has the compassion to stop a crowd and to say, I need to talk to this woman. I need to give her a chance to tell her story. I need to vindicate that she was right in what she did, that she had great faith. She has nothing to be ashamed of. And He goes and He spends time with the family in bereavement. He sits with the family. He comforts the family. He makes it that small, intimate group. And then Jesus, in godlike fashion, can't stand Himself. He can't stand to have death win. It cannot have the victory. And He raises the dead because He has the power to help, and He wants to. We serve a God who cares. We serve a God who has the power to help. That's what I see when I study the book of Mark. And for those of us who are Christians, it's a reminder of the amazing God that we serve. And if you're not a Christian yet, and you're wondering about this book, and you're wondering what you should believe about this book, I want to encourage you to know that He cares, and He has the power to help you where you are. And we as the body of Christ stand ready to help. We don't have the ability to raise the dead. We don't have the ability to make disease go away. But we can be with you in the storm. We can walk with you, and we will pray to the one who has the power to help. And He will see us through. And if there is any way that we can assist you in your walk of faith, we invite you to come as we stand and sing.